Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. And yes, Brexit again, this time based on one of the more bizarre comments that Boris Johnson made yesterday when discussing, amongst a whole range of things, the EU deal. This time, he said that a no deal was a very good option. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, a little bit weird this for me, because here we are in July. With Brexit. Now, I thought June would be a big Brexit month, and so it was. Obviously, June was the month when, if the government were going to extend, that was the month they were going to do so. Now the Brexiteers are saying it's impossible to extend. It's not actually impossible, but it is. You'd have to change the law. And politically, I think it's impossible. I think it's been impossible for some months, politically speaking. For Boris Johnson, at any rate. But a little bit like with January. January was the big month of Brexit. It wasn't a will they, won't they. We knew they were going to, but it was a relatively muted. Then all of a sudden, Brexit started becoming a major conversation in February when we were no longer members. And now it's like June, we build up to this point at the end of June, which is the date assigned as being the date at which you need to extend the transition period, and that comes and goes. And then it's all kicking off again. Now the government are trying to throw all sorts of things. They're willing to talk about it far more than they were, ironically, last month. Maybe they just feel a bit more comfortable doing so. But anyway, semantics out the way, first of all, on what Boris Johnson said yesterday. So he described a no-deal Brexit as a very good option. Now, option implies that you have a choice. But I thought a no-deal Brexit is what you got when you didn't have a choice, when none of the so-called options available were acceptable. Not so. Apparently now it's a choice. It's on the menu. In which case, I'd have asked the Prime Minister what the other available choices are. So, Prime Minister, you've got this range of choices. What are they? That's what I'd be asking. What are your choices? Don't give me depends on the EU. No, what are your choices? You know, so we can judge for ourselves whether it's a good option or not. But let's also remind ourselves of how we ended up here. So back in 2016, all, and I mean all, Brexit supporting campaigns, including his own, laughed off the suggestion that we'd end up with a cliff edge no-deal scenario if we didn't, for some bizarre reason, manage to get our unicorn deal agreed with the EU. Project Fear, they called it. Boris Johnson personally insisted that we will continue to have access to the single market, along with every other Brexiteer that was campaigning. Wasn't even up for discussion, it was a given. A year later, he was saying that there was no plan for a no-deal Brexit, because, in his words, we are going to get a great deal. Now he is saying that a no-deal Brexit is not just a brainless negotiating strategy in order to get the EU to back down, which, of course, hasn't worked, but that actually it's a good option. At a stroke, he is now saying that a no-deal Brexit is not just the default position, but the preferred position. He also tried to pull this trick from earlier in the year about linking the concept of a no-deal Brexit with what he called an Australian-style agreement. Now, you know, he's using this trick because some people who will not understand that will think, oh, it's modelled on another country. Okay, that's fine then. No. Just so to make sure everyone does understand what this means. The Australia-style arrangement is so bad that Australia is in talks with the EU to get a proper arrangement. So what the Prime Minister is saying in his mission, you know, to make Britain great again, is that we are aspiring to get the sort of arrangement with our closest neighbours that the much more distant Australia thinks is a heap of shit and want to consign to the dustbin of history with all possible haste. In fact, even for someone who wasn't aware of Australia's arrangements with the EU, any critically thinking person would have worked it out from Johnson saying that not getting a deal with the EU allows us to trade on Australian terms. In other words, nothing at all for most aspects of trade. And referring to distant countries when talking about EU trade is also disturbing, because the EU is by far and away our largest trading partner. Far and away. Second place doesn't even come close. But it's only the third largest for Australia. And that is large enough for them to want to seriously negotiate a deal. So how much more important should it be for us? You know, let us also remember Boris Johnson recently promised that a deal would be concluded by the end of July. And that's recent. That was just a few weeks ago, so a couple of weeks ago, in fact. So why is he now mulling over publicly, the concept of a no-deal Brexit being a good option when he's promised us that deal by the end of July? Well, that's this month now. So he has just under 4 weeks. And the most recent round of talks that took place, last week was abandoned early because, Michel Barnier of the EU couldn't be bothered pissing about when the UK were clearly trying to get out of their international obligations, the international treaty they signed just at the start of this year. And I mean, there's more rounds scheduled. There's another round in this coming week. Both sides have agreed to meet more frequently, but there's nothing happening. It's going to be in London this time, next week. But the two sides haven't even agreed on the agenda. The UK are saying the talks are for this, and the EU are saying, no, it's for this. They don't even agree on how long they're going to be. It's pretty clear, I think, from the start that the government intended the talks to proceed this way. They keep saying how deals are only ever reached at the 11th hour. Now, if they believe that, if that's not just them, because obviously things that they could say for the public consumption could just be, again, part of their brainless negotiating strategy. But if they genuinely believe that, then the idea that nothing of substance would be discussed shouldn't even be a surprise, because they just expect, stick by your guns, stick by your guns, stick by your guns, stick by your guns. And then at the 11th hour, the EU will go, OK, have what you want. But now he's changing what he's saying. Because instead of assuring people that he's going to get this deal by the end of the month, which he made within the last fortnight, and that it will appear as if by magic right at the end, he's now saying that no deal is actually good. I mean, is he trying to persuade people of this? I mean, if we do crash out without a deal, and everyone is up in arms about the disaster unfolding, and I have to say, someone pointed out today, Nigel Farage is trying to claim about all the people that are supporting a no-deal Brexit. Even he is saying 69% of leavers want to leave without a deal. So that's 69% of 52%. It's about 36%. That's a bit of a minority, isn't it, Mr. Farage? So what Nigel Farage is trying to say is that the majority of the country do not want to leave with a no-deal Brexit. A large majority of the country absolutely do not want to leave. And we agree on that. That is absolutely in agreement. So we crash out without a deal, let's say. Everyone's up in arms about the disaster unfolding. I have no doubts whatsoever that under this scenario, Boris Johnson will just blame us for voting Brexit. Well, it's your fault, you voted for it. Never mind the fact that he campaigned for it. Also never mind that Brexit in 2016, at the point people were voting for it, meant accessing the single market. What the appeal was different for different people. But for every single person, it meant still accessing the single market as a non-member when people voted. He will just say he's enforcing the will of the people. But if a no deal really is a good option, why are we carrying on with the talks then? We don't need talks to have a no deal. After all, official government policy was to have abandoned the talks by now. Earlier this year, Boris Johnson said that if there was no serious progress made, then he would just walk away and focus on no deal planning for the rest of the year. So what happened? His bluff was called. Is he showing that he's serious? No. He's preparing to host the UK the EU in the UK next week. Why are journalists not asking him about this? And also, just finally, if a no-deal Brexit was such a good option, even if it's not the best option, but it's decent enough, okay, why wasn't it proposed as an option during the Get Brexit Done general election? Why did he insist that he had a deal that was oven ready? He said that if you vote for Labour, if you vote for Jeremy Corbyn, that he will be fannying about negotiating a different deal. Well, I've already got the deal. It's there. It's all written. It's all done. There is no deal. We've said at the time that there was no deal, and we were dismissed for it. Now the very people who dismissed it are saying that somehow it's good that there's no deal. How does that work then? But anyway, there it is. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.